Howdy, YouTube parts. Jack Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today, we're going to do a project I've never done before on the channel. And we are going to make a leather handle for a cast iron skillet so that you can pull it off the fire or off the stove and not burn your hand. So come on in and let's get started. All right, so I've got one of the pieces cut out. I'll need two of these. Here's the pattern that I made, and I just made it to where I make sure that when I stitch these together, I've still got enough space in here to slide that on. And I don't have a cast iron skillet with me at the moment, but where I still have room to slide this on and grab a hold of it. So I made it, it looks like it's kind of wide, but some of the cast iron skillets, and this is actually for my nephew, he cooks on cast iron all the time, so I'm making it for him, but some of those cast iron skillets have a pretty good size handle, especially down at the end. So I've made one side out of that pattern. Now I'm going to make another side, but I'm going to flip that over. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece of this off so I don't have to fight this where it's been all rolled up. And I try to keep my leather flat. This piece just happened to buy secondhand, some leftover pieces from the yard sale, so flatten that out a little bit, and then I'll go ahead and flip over my pattern so that it's going to match, because this is the way I did it on this side. So I'm going to flip it over on this side so that I get a perfect match. So I'll just trace my pattern, and I made that pattern with a couple of French curves, a straight edge, and a piece of white poster board. So, you know, there's not a lot to it, but it does the job, and I can use it over and over and over. So if he wants more handles or somebody else wants some, it's not going to be a problem to reproduce those. I'm going to cut that little section right there out of my way, because just the first quarter inch or so is straight. And then I started with the French curve, and that's where you kind of get the little bow in it. And then I made the end a little bit larger, just so it would dissipate more heat and be safer. So if you were cooking on a campfire or on a stove and you went to go remove the cast iron skillet or pan from either one, when you slide this on the handle, that would dissipate the heat to the leather and then allow you to remove that without having a pot holder. Basically, that's what it is a glorified shaped pot holder for a cast iron skillet. So let's go ahead and I'll come down with my stitching line. So I'll take my grooving tool and groove in my stitching line. And I'm using obviously the exact same setting that I used on the other side. And I want to go very careful so that I get it to match the other side. Remove those scraps, and I'm not going to bevel anything till I'm done, and I'm only going to bevel the top, and then I'll go ahead and burnish it. So I won't do any of that at this point. So the next thing I need to do is go ahead and do the punching for my stitching holes. Let me get a piece of what I call working leather. It's nice and thick, and I can punch into that on top of my, I could punch directly in here, but I do like punching into a thicker, harder piece of leather, and it makes my holes, seems to make my holes cleaner. I'll get me a 2-hole punch and then my 4-hole punch. And let's just go ahead and put a little bit of beeswax on those. They'll remove much easier. Get my mallet. And let's go ahead and start down here at the bottom with a 2-hole. Then once I get past that little straight run, I can move to my 4-hole, and it makes real nice clean holes going through into that other piece of leather. Beeswax lets it pop out real nice and easy. Then I get to that curved area. I'm going to go ahead and move back to my 2-hole so I can get around that curve. So that'll take just a little bit longer because you're lessening the number of holes you're putting in at a time, and you're working around that curve. Now that I'm heading to the straight area of the curve, I can go back to my 4-hole, and as long as I'm on a fairly straight run, I can get away with that 4-hole. Now I'm back to the other corner, the rounded area. I'll have to go back to my 2-hole punch so I can get around that corner. And I'm working my way around staying on that grooved line I put in there. Move back to my 4-hole. And then I get down to the end, move back to my 2-hole again. Alright, so there's all of my holes punched all the way around on that piece. Now we need to move to this piece. And the first thing I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to put it under here, and I'm going to take my 1-hole punch. I'm going to match up these two pieces so that the finished side is out. Match up this straight edge at the bottom. Then I can go ahead and place that in the first hole on the one that I've already punched. And I'll punch that through both pieces. That gives me my starting hole, so I know exactly where to start, and those holes are going to line up. Then I just go back to the exact same way I did the other side, and then continue down that groove line. And I believe when I get done, I am going to dye this. I'm not going to dye the inside that touches the skillet. I'm going to leave it alone. But I am going to dye the outside. So that may determine or will determine what color of thread that I'm going to use to stitch this. Work my way around that corner just like I did on the other side. Then I can move back and forth with those punches. Until I get to the other end. And then that way I ensure by starting that off like that, with that single punch, that those holes are going to line up with one another on this end. And then all the way around. So that's ready to stitch. Let me get my thread, and I'll be using synthetic sinew. And let me get my needles, and then I'll be right back. Alright, so I've got 2 needles. I've got my 2 pieces of leather. I've got my synthetic sinew, and I went with tan, and I've decided I am not going to dye this when I'm done. I'm going to leave it natural and then hit it with leather sheen
and that will give it a little shine, and it'll also protect it. So I'm going to take my sinew around one time around the entire area I'm going to stitch, and then I always do the rule of thumb of 4 times that amount for doing my stitching, and because I'm using a saddle stitch, so basically you're using 2 times or close to 2 times the amount of sinew or thread that you would use for just a straight stitch. So let's take this piece, this end, and we're going to put it through the needle, and then I'll bring it down 8 inches, 6 to 8 inches or so. And as I get toward the end of that, all I'll have to do is just pull that out to use it. So it'll help keep my sinew short at this point. And what I do is I just pull them up close to one another like this, make sure I have the same amount on both ends hanging through. So since I'm doing a saddle stitch, I'm going to start by putting one needle through my first hole through both pieces. So I want to make sure that those holes line up. Then I want to pull that through and make sure that I have the same amount of sinew on both sides hanging out. So I've got the same amount. Then I'm going to take that same needle, I'm going to go back through the back side, the next hole, line it up with the next hole on the other side, and I'm going to pull that through. Now when you get to the end of it, you want to stop, because if not, you'll pull this all the way through until you get it locked in. So you'll just keep pulling that through. Then take your second needle that's coming out of this side and put it in that second hole. And you're going to go through both pieces in the second hole, but you're going the opposite direction. Now, it looks like I've got a bird's nest here. Let me get that. Looks like I've got a piece of sinew that's not in the greatest of shape here. So let me get that straightened out. Now that I've got both of them through there, I can take, I've got a loop in my first 2 holes. I can take this and tighten it down. I can snug that down real snug. Now, if you want to make it even tighter and you're concerned about that stitch breaking, which I'm not for what you're using this for. It's not like you're using it for a holster. You're going to be taking something in and out a lot. You could double stitch that first hole, those first 2 holes. I'm not concerned about that, so I'm going to go to the third hole. Go through both pieces, come through the front. Now I can snug that down because I've got that first one locked in. Take the back needle and go through the third hole, front and back. Pull it all the way through. Again, now that I've got that both looped, I can lock that in. I can pull on both sides. And then I'll just continue that all the way around. When I get to the last 2 or 3 holes, I'll bring you back and show you how I'll tie that off and lock it in without you seeing anything on the outside. So I'll go ahead, stitch this. When I get down to this end, I'll bring you back. Alright, so I'm down to the last 4 holes here, and I'll just continue the saddle stitching until I get down to the last hole. And I've saddle stitched a lot of stuff, holsters and so forth, knife sheaths, and it's just, I've never found it to disappoint as far as how tough it is, uh, how well it holds. I've never had, knock on wood, I've never had a stitch fail when I've used saddle stitching on a piece, so it's kind of my go-to. It does take a little while, but if you, what I have found anyway, if you want longevity and you want, you know, the piece to be nice and secure, then I go with saddle stitching. Alright, I'm down to the last hole here. So, what I'm going to do is I am going to go through the hole just like I would on a normal saddle stitch. Take my other needle on the other side, go back through the hole, same hole, lock that in, then I'm going to back up a hole and hope that I can get that through there, because now I've got 2 stitches in that hole. So I'm going back, and that's what that's going to do, is lock all that in and give that a double stitch. So I'm taking the back needle through the second hole again, just like I did on the other side. Now you notice I'm using a little pair of needle nose to pull my needle through, because that's really tight now that I've got a double stitch in there. Now I can pull that really tight, sink that sinew down in there, then I'm going to take my needle, put it through only the first thickness of leather, and pull it through. Take my second needle from the other side and do the same thing. I'm only going to put it through the one thickness of leather, have it come out between, let me get my other needle out of there. There we go. So have it come out between the 2 pieces also. So you can see how those come out between. I'm going to go ahead and go up about 3 or 4 inches, cut that off. Now all I have to do is tie a knot, and that knot will sink between those 2 pieces of leather and you won't see it. So what you end up with is a nice hidden knot that terminates all that. I can cut it off. Use a lighter and melt that wax, because that sinew has wax on it. And then I can flatten that knot out with my mallet. So you end up with a hidden knot right there. So it makes it nice. There's no knots on the outside. So let's set this aside. My needles. And then now I want to go ahead and take my small beveler, and I want to make sure I have my small one. I don't want my larger one. There's my small one. Because I just want a small bevel. Let me get my stropping stick here. Polish that up. And then I can go ahead and do my beveling. I waited till I did my stitching and got it stitched together before I beveled. I didn't want to bevel the two pieces that touched, the unfinished side. So I'll go ahead around that entire piece on that side and at the bottom. And then I'll flip it over. And do the same. On the other side. And with that small beveler, just taking, you can see how much I'm taking off. Not very much at all. Just enough to knock off that sharp edge of that leather. And I should be able to get a nice varnish out of that. We'll find out here shortly. And go all the way to the end. And then make sure, yeah, I already did that end. So I can put that back, get my sponge, and I just want it moist. I don't want it wet, so I'm going to wring almost all that moisture out of that sponge. And then I'm just going to hit that edge just to get it a little moist. I want to make sure I get the whole edge. I don't want to just get one side of it. So I'm just barely getting that damp. Once I get that damp, I'm going to move my scraps off here. I can take my burnishing tool I'm not pressing hard. I just very light pressure, but you can tell how quickly I'm moving. And this should give me a nice finish and actually seal up that joint between those two pieces of leather where the flat ends were. And I'll give you a better look here in a minute as soon as we get this burnished here. And again, the key is not how hard you press, but consistent pressure and speed. And that's what gives it that, getting it moist and that speed and that little pressure is what gives it that nice finish. Alright, hopefully you can see that. You can see that slicked, shiny finish. And I've got that all the way around. So, I've got a nice burnished edge. Now I can go ahead and take a nice clean cloth, and it's lint free, won't put any lint out. Take my Fibings leather sheen, put some on a cloth, and then I can go ahead and coat this piece, because I'm not going to dye it, I'm just going to put the sheen on it. And I'll put it on the front, the edges that I just burnished, and then I'll put it on the back also. So instead of dyeing it, I'm just going to leave it natural color and put on the sheen. Now, what I'll probably do is go ahead and coat it. You see this side's wanting to come back to its natural color a little bit. It might darken it just a little bit, but it's pretty much going to stay natural color. And I'll do both sides. I really like the way, the look you get with this. Now I'll take a microfiber cloth, and this is new, clean. Again, it's also lint free. And I'll start on the edges. And that'll bring that sheen back up. That was on there when I did my burnishing, but now it's going to have that protectant on there. and I can buff the front and the back. And it did bring out some little differences in character and the little imperfections that were in this leather. Again, it was some rolled up leather I got out of a box from a yard sale. There's some little veg tan. All right. So I think you can tell by looking in the light, yeah, look how shiny that is now. So it's got a nice sheen to it. It gave it a little bit of character. There's some uh, little darker patches here and there. So it's turned out really nice. And then I don't have a cast iron skillet with me right now, but let's take a skillet, be the same idea, slide it on the cast iron skillet. You can pick that up off the fire or off of the stove and not burn your hand. And if you were outside doing a lot of outdoor camping, cooking, you can put that right in your pocket. Take it out of your pocket, slide it on the handle of the skillet, and there you go. All right, there's another project in the books. You can see got a nice shine, nice sheen on that. Again, great, fits your hand good. It's going to fit a variety of sized handles depending on what you're using it for. But that'll go right in your pocket if you were camping. And then slide it right on the skillet. It makes a nice little pot holder type device out of leather so you can handle your skillets and your pans. So, turned out great. Nice little project that didn't take a lot of time, didn't take a lot of materials, just a little thought, and you could design it however you want. So, I appreciate you coming along, appreciate you watching. Please, like I always say, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.